Are you a sick, perverted, power-hungry freak?
Let's get into it. Imagine being at the lowest point of your life. You've lost your parents, your family home, and need employment. Then imagine being introduced to a very successful and powerful billionaire who agrees to help you turn your life around. He showers you with compliments. He shares personal stories with you. He tells you how much he trusts you and that he can be himself around you. He gives you extravagant gifts and promises you a lucrative position in his company. Sounds like a fairy tale, right? Then imagine finding out it was all a ploy, that these were not the acts of a benevolent benefactor, but a ruthless and abusive monster who was grooming you to satisfy his twisted, dark desires. That is allegedly what happened to Janel Grant. If you remember, on March 30, 2022, an anonymous person claiming to be a friend of a former employee emailed the WWE Board of Directors regarding alleged sexual misconduct by Vince McMahon. The email stated that this friend's salary was doubled from $100,000 to $200,000 after the relationship began, and that Vince gave her like a toy to John Laurinaitis. Those words have stuck with me ever since I first read them. The email went on to say, quote, "My friend was so scared, so she quit after Vince McMahon and lawyer Jerry paid her millions of dollars to shut up." Fast forward to January 25th, 2024, when a 67-page lawsuit is filed against Vince McMahon, John Laurinaitis, and the WWE by attorneys representing Janel Grant, the same woman who was the subject of the anonymous email. Poetic justice that the woman whose experience was responsible for bringing the NDAs and hush money payments to light is the same woman that is going to put the final nail in the coffin of Vince's career and legacy. The suit alleges, among many other things, that she is a victim of emotional distress, SA, and trafficking by Vince McMahon. If she signed an NDA, how are we getting details now? Well, Ms. Grant's lawyers are making the case that it is void and unenforceable pursuant to Connecticut common law for a number of reasons, including the fact that she claims to have signed under duress. Additionally, even if the court does not accept the reasons outlined in the complaint, it is still void because Vince did not make a second payment to Ms. Grant in the amount of $500,000 within 10 days of February 1st, 2023, as outlined in the contract. The lawsuit details very graphically her accounts of things that she alleged happened to her, and those details are easily accessible in the complaint itself, other creators' videos, articles, and message boards. While there are some details that we need to discuss as part of the bigger picture, we are not going into those accounts in depth. I'll be putting a link in the description to the complaint so those who wish to can read everything uncensored. Janel Grant met Vince McMahon in March of 2019 after the resident manager of the apartment building she and Vince both lived in reached out to him and asked if he would be willing to talk to Janel, that she had been going through hardship and could do great things if she had the opportunity. In the complaint, here is how her situation was described. The two met in March 2019 when Miss Grant was dealing with profound grief and struggling financially. After devoting years to around-the-clock caregiving, her parents passed away. On top of that, she was unemployed, and her family home was lost in her parents' bankruptcy. She had been volunteering and taking non-paying jobs to build her resume. This is where the first question arises. She had no income, no job, but was living at what at the time was branded Trump Park Stamford, but is now known as Park Tower Stamford, a 36-story luxury high-rise.
Trump Park Stamford has set a new standard of luxury living, making it the finest residential tower in all of Fairfield County. Panoramic views, distinctive architecture and superior materials, along with an extensive array of amenities and white glove service, make Trump Park Stamford city living at its best.
How was she living there? He agreed, and a day and time was set for them to meet in his condo. She brought her resume, a notebook, and cookies as a thank you gift for his time. They sat at his dining room table and he read over her resume, complimenting her on her communication skills and common sense. The conversation turned to their personal lives, and she shared the things that had happened to her that put her in the position she was in, and other trauma that had led her to seek financial independence to ensure she would never experience losing her home again. He shared stories of his childhood, the trauma he endured, and growing up in poverty. He also talked about his current family dynamics, even talking about his separation from Linda, referring to her as his ex and her being long gone. That his marital status was an arrangement on paper for business purposes, and that he lived a quiet, isolated existence outside of the WWE. At the end of their meeting, he stated that he didn't just want to give her a job, he wanted to give her a life and would find a spot for her within WWE. She was understandably excited, and all he asked in return was a simple thank you and a hug. Over the next 2 months, the two would meet regularly under the guise of him updating her on the job placement. She would bring sample job descriptions she found online to review with him. He would listen to her, ask her questions, and point out qualities that he described as rare gifts, including her quote-unquote goodness, vivaciousness, childlike innocence, and ability to be vulnerable. All things that she stated made her an easy target. During these meetings, she states that he started to display a decreasing level of boundaries. He would greet her in his underwear. He would touch her, repeatedly ask for hugs, all the while reassuring her he was doing everything he could to find her the perfect position at the company. At the same time, however, he would tell her things like their closeness should be kept secret, and that it would cause big problems for them both and the company if there were any rumors about their relationship. He also told her that while he protects people who are loyal to him, he wouldn't hesitate to call upon his world-class legal resources to deal with someone who became a problem. One of the gifts he gave her was a WrestleMania VIP experience, and she recounted how overcome with emotion she was while attending the event because she really felt like the promises he was making would come true. May of 2019 is when Vince allegedly really started pushing for a physical relationship with her, from telling her to kiss him and expressing that he wanted her, to begging just to hold her. She said she feared not only her future employment, but also legal repercussions since he had already made the comment about his legal team dealing with problems. If this is how it happened, then in my opinion she would acquiesce just enough to appease him, hoping that it would end there, and then in return he would reward her with a little more progress on the job front. She received the official offer letter on May 17th for the position of Legal Administrator Coordinator with a salary of $75,000. Again, she's living in a luxury condo in Connecticut. $75,000 was not going to cover her expenses. And why would one put up with behavior that up to this point has been described as inappropriate and uncomfortable for a job that will not pay the bills? It just doesn't make sense. The next day, after being, as she put it, summoned to Vince's condo, she took a copy of the offer letter with her to review. He told her that her new boss was a WWE employee who worked in risk and government relations, referred to in the complaint as WWE employee number 1. But it's being speculated that it was Rich Herring. Vince said he was a decades-long family friend and confidant, similar in age to him, and one of a small original group he referred to as the Titan family. He stated that outside of his attorney, Jerry McDevitt, employee number 1 was the most feared figure in the company because he was usually the one who fired people. It was on this night that she said she gave in to his desire for sex. She said she felt that he had trapped her in an impossible situation as she feared adverse career and personal consequences and legal retaliation if she declined. She stated that he said, quote, "This is what I've been waiting for," as he performed oral sex on her. When she asked that protection be used, he responded that there was no need to worry because he was, quote unquote, clean. During the job procurement phase of their relationship, she met with 4 different people in WWE, 2 of them being very high-ranking members of the organization and referred to in the complaint as Corporate Officer Number 2 and Corporate Officer Number 4. All the while, Vince acted like it was out of his hands. He was the CEO. He could have placed her anywhere in the company if it was truly about helping her find a job. But it wasn't about that. This was a game. In my opinion, he was grooming her, testing her, and pushing her to see what she would allow, to see what level of control she would give to him. And this is why I believe Rita Chatterton's account of what happened to her. She said Vince had flashed money and celebrity, everything at her, but only if she engaged with him sexually. Rita wasn't having it, and that's when he allegedly assaulted her and then fired her for having sexual relations with an employee. In my opinion, Rita became a liability, and he wasn't going to make that mistake again. So I believe he put Janel through her paces to see if she was going to play ball before putting himself at risk. It was her hope that once she started working, he would stop his advances and even spoke with him about her concerns of being in a sexual relationship with the CEO of the company she worked for, in his legal department no less. She said he brushed off her concerns, telling her he never saw their sexual relationship ending, and she just had to not tell anyone, and that it would quote-unquote look legit. He also told her to focus on the positives, asking her, quote, "Isn't that what you've always wanted?" and telling her she was about to start an adventure and, quote, gain a new family with the WWE as a surrogate for the family she had lost. Her role within the legal department, having been created exclusively for her, did not leave her with much work to do, and she said she struggled to appear busy while hearing her colleagues complain about how much work they had. She also started having the feeling that Vince's direction of keeping their relationship a secret only applied to her. She said her boss would tell stories to the staff about others at the company, and if Vince was ever the subject, he would turn to her with a smile, a finger point, or a comment that would draw attention to her connection to Vince and say things like, "She knows what I'm talking about." She also stated that corporate employee number 4, who had called her with the news that she was hired, was cold to her and avoided even passing her in the hallway. She stated that other employees had noticed and commented on employee number 4's behavior towards her. She said the combination of Vince allegedly texting her numerous sexual messages during the week, worrying that her employment hinged on keeping him satisfied, and feeling that she was being watched and talked about led her to experience debilitating panic attacks. In addition to her panic attacks, Janel says she started experiencing increasingly severe physical, mental, and emotional symptoms, including sleep disruption, dizziness, exhaustion, rashes, weight loss, hair loss, and migraines. In November, when she informed him that her doctor suggested that her symptoms stemmed from trauma and ongoing stress, Vince mocked her. "Emotional trauma, my ass," and insisted she see a doctor of his choosing on his dime. She said she felt pressured to do so. She said he became adamant about having her regularly send him explicit photographs and routinely assured her that the photographs she was sending to him were, quote, to remain private and part of their secret world. As time went on, Janel alleged that Vince would start to degrade her, calling her, quote, his bitch. She said that the number of sexual encounters they had increased, as did his aggression. This led to her starting to sustain injuries like bleeding and pain from his forceful use of sex toys. She said he was most aggressive when using certain sex toys named after male WWE wrestlers and performers. That he named the sex toys so that the color of the toy matched the race of the wrestler. She said he was infatuated with pretending that other men, mostly certain WWE talent, were in the room with them. In my opinion, he was really trying to get her used to the idea of other men not only being in the room, but also touching her. She stated that when she would tell Vince that she was physically injured during their encounters, his response would vary from apologies to blaming impulse control. Trigger warning. She said there were some encounters that were particularly brutal, that she sustained in addition to pain and bleeding, swelling, bruising, and spans of incontinence resulting from his forceful use of his fists, adult toys, and objects unsafe for vaginal insertion or penetration. She once texted him that she was injured during their most recent sexual encounter, the details of which can be found in the complaint. The next day, she texted him an update that she was still, quote, really uncomfortable and, quote, I got hurt in some way that I'm having trouble describing. He apologized by saying, quote, sometimes I just get carried away. I believe her account, and I'm not at all surprised that he would use unsafe objects on a sexual partner for his own pleasure. Why do I believe that? Because in the interview he gave to Playboy in 2001, he talked about going into the woods with a girl and getting naked. Quote, it felt good, and for some reason I wanted to put crushed up leaves into her. One could say that maybe Janel was a little paranoid when she thought people like corporate employee number 4 and others knew of her relationship with Vince in the beginning. It's easy when you feel guilty about something to think everyone knows. But in March 2020, she learned her fears were justified. According to the complaint, on March 26, 2020, Vince sent a lengthy message to her describing in detail the circumstances surrounding sharing explicit photographs of her with a former WWE referee. Vince allegedly described how the referee left to masturbate and told her she made a perfect stranger very happy. She hoped he was joking or just fantasizing, but that was not the case. He told her not to worry because the referee was loyal to him. A few days later, he texted her saying that the referee had shown one of her naked photos to a friend. So not only did Vince allegedly show pictures on his phone, but he also allegedly sent them out and encouraged those who he sent them to share them with their friends. Odd behavior for a man who was so concerned about keeping things secret. If this is true, it tells me he knew how well insulated he was and that he wasn't at risk of being exposed. Which also tells me this is not the first time he has done something like this and that she was not the first. She said that shortly after that conversation, he told her he protected her job from the furlough that had seen a large number of employees, many from her own department, let go. This is another example of his mind games, keeping her off balance and making her dependent upon him, making her feel like only he can protect her, but at the same time being the threat that she needs protection from. At this point, she said he started really pushing for her to engage with him in a threesome with a friend. He knew she didn't want to, so he started working her to make her more receptive. He sent her a large bouquet of flowers and started calling her his girlfriend. When that wasn't enough, he tried the guilt card, allegedly telling her that the plans were already made and suggested he would lose a friendship if she didn't go through with it. On the day of the threesome, she said after arriving at Vince's condo, she told him one more time she didn't want to go through with it and that she was scared of being, quote, thrown around like a rag doll. His response? She said he told her he loved her for the first time. She said after that night, he became even more controlling and sadistic and started incorporating choking, sensory deprivation, pain, humiliation, and group scenarios. She said on one occasion he instructed her, quote, do not knock on the door, because if I see you, I will grape you in the hallway. She said he was now openly sharing explicit photographs and stories about her with the WWE crew at TV tapings, a group she said he referred to as her quote-unquote fan club. There's a text message that was included in the lawsuit, and I can only show half of it as the rest is too graphic. In November 2020, Vince allegedly pressed her to make explicit photos and videos to send to John Laurinaitis, the man Vince told her would start joining them in the bedroom. She said he orchestrated exchanges by instructing her when to create the explicit content, including what to say, and provided her with notes to adjust her performance. In March 2021, she was transferred to the Talent Relations Department, where she would report directly to John Laurinaitis. And she said it was made pretty clear to her that she was to engage with both men sexually, both physically and with pictures and video. She said as soon as she began working directly for Laurinaitis, forcible touching and overtly sexual behaviors became part of her daily life. On numerous occasions, she was directed to visit Laurinaitis at his hotel room before work to serve herself to him as quote-unquote breakfast. On May 24th, 2021, Vince messaged her to remind her that a mistake could destroy her career and that she should pursue verbal communication rather than written wherever possible. The next two sexual encounters that are detailed in the lawsuit allege her being essayed once by both Vince and Laurinaitis in his office, where her pleas for them to stop and repeatedly saying no were answered with "take it, bitch," and "no means yes." And the other by Vince during the middle of the workday in his private locker room at the company headquarters, where he allegedly locked the door and forced himself on her over a massage table. She stated that later that day, $15,000 in gift cards to Bloomingdale's were delivered by Vince's personal assistant to her office. The last part of the complaint revolves around someone who is referred to as WWE Superstar, but is believed by many to be Brock Lesnar, due to the timing of the events outlined in the complaint and his sudden absence from current WWE programming following him appearing to be implicated in the suit. Janel stated that in July 2021, Vince was trying to recruit a WWE superstar for a sexual encounter with her, and that he would be their new quote-unquote playmate. She said he described his fantasy of seeing her engaged in unmerciful sexual acts with WWE Superstar, during which he would rip her open. She stated that Vince directed her to create personalized sexual content for the Superstar that he shared with the Superstar, and then informed her he liked what he saw. On July 21, 2021, WWE Superstar flew in for what Vince described as a business dinner, as well as a sexual encounter with her in Vince's condo. It was her understanding that the dinner was to discuss Superstar's continued involvement with the WWE. Those who regularly watched in the early 2000s may remember a storyline that played out in 2003 involving Stephanie's yelling at her father over him offering her up to business associates.
What do you mean?
I'm sorry that all my life I've let you manipulate me and use me. Every time I went out to dinner with one of your business associates, I was 17 years old. You don't think they told me what you promised them I'd do? And guess what, Dad? I did it. I did it for you, the things I did with them, and I'm ashamed of myself. I'm ashamed of myself that I'm just like you.
To clarify, I am not suggesting or inferring that Vince did this to Stephanie in real life. I am just showing how life seemed to once again imitate his art. She said there was no sexual encounter with WWE Superstar that night because he was too intoxicated and was taken back to the plane. However, later that evening, after Vince recounted the story about his dinner to her, he made a request to role-play a sexual encounter in which he acted as if he were WWE Superstar. What happened next is far too graphic to discuss here. If you're not aware of what took place that night, just know it was bad enough that she said he forbade her from leaving his condo that night until she would verbally assure him that there wasn't a problem and that everything was okay between them. The next month was SummerSlam, and it was around this time that Vince and WWE Superstar reached an informal agreement for his return. She said Vince continued to advertise a sexual encounter with her during their formal negotiation of booking a new contract. She stated that in December of 2021, he gave her personal cell phone number to said Superstar and promised she'll do anything requested of her. Allegedly, Superstar revealed a fetish to Janel and tested Vince's promise that she would do anything with a request that she send a video of herself urinating. After she sent him the video, she said he told her that if she had not complied with the request, he would have lost interest in her, and then called her a bitch. The same month, she stated that Superstar expressed desire to set a play date to have a sexual encounter. However, a snowstorm changed the travel plans, and she said she used the weather and COVID-19 as an excuse to back out. It's not clear from the complaint if they actually ever had intercourse, but in her statement, she said on March 2nd, 2022, after the NDA was signed, that Vince instructed her to continue having sexual relations with other men, including WWE Superstar in the meantime. So one can assume there was a sexual encounter. Janel said in early January of 2022, Vince suddenly distanced himself from her and said he couldn't speak to her or be in the same room as her. But on January 9th, he agreed to speak with her in his condo. During this meeting, he told her that his wife Linda had learned about his relationship with her and that she was going to divorce him and he was going to lose the condo. Purportedly in an attempt to save his marriage and avoid both the negative publicity and other repercussions of a divorce, Vince wanted to ensure that Janel would remain silent about the nature of their relationship in order to preserve his controlling interest in WWE. She said he told her that if she left WWE, signed an NDA, he was confident Linda would not divorce him. He could remain in the condo and she could avoid reputational harm. He ended up selling that condo for half of what he originally paid a year later. What happened to "my ex is long gone and it's an arrangement on paper for business purposes"? She stated that while the terms of the NDA were being negotiated, he was still texting her sexual messages and encouraging her to send explicit messages to Superstar. She said he pressured her continuously to sign the NDA and to have her attorney stop making edits. This is where the claim that she signed under duress comes in. She said Vince continued pressuring her with calls during which she said he pleaded, demanded, threatened, and begged her to sign the NDA. She said, quote, he kept reiterating that by not signing, she would jeopardize him, the company, and his family, and that she would become the subject of national headlines, and her reputation would be ruined if she did not sign by the start of WWE's live programming schedule on January 28th. He reassured her that nothing would change between them, and she would emerge with her reputation intact if she would simply sign the NDA. She said in a state of mental defeat and fear of his threats, she gave in to the pressure and signed the NDA just before the deadline. She resigned on February 2nd, and on March 2nd, Vince called her to talk about how his life had blown up over the last couple of weeks and that they would reconnect after WrestleMania. That would be the last time they spoke. On March 30th, Janel's attorney received a call from Vince's attorney letting them know that there had been an anonymous email about the relationship between Janel and McMahon and Laurinaitis sent to the board of directors. That brings us to today. Now, before we get into everything that has happened since the lawsuit was filed, I want to discuss what I believe transpired. We don't know much about Janel, her upbringing, her family, what her life was like before she joined WWE. We don't know what trauma occurred that she told Vince about. She's 43 years old and has no online presence, under the name Janel Grant anyway. Hell, there's only one other picture of her I could find, and it was taken 6 months before she met Vince. As we covered earlier, she was unemployed, in dire financial straits, her family home lost, but living in a luxury condo. How? It seems from the lawsuit that she didn't have much family around, since Vince made a point of saying that the WWE would be her surrogate family. So if she's just getting advice and working volunteer jobs, how are these bills getting paid? Her statement is that he was pretty forward from the beginning. Before she even worked at WWE, she detailed how uncomfortable she was with his behavior. Was her situation so bad that he was her only hope and she put up with everything in the beginning just to get a job? I don't think so. I think Vince was Vince, and he had a target and he played his game. He made her feel good with the attention, the expensive gifts, and the promises of a job, all the while manipulating her for his own desires. And I think for a time there was a consensual relationship. I think Vince, being the sadist and monster he is, saw an opportunity to take advantage of a woman who needed help, while she, at the same time, if you believe her story, needed rescuing. She said he called her his girlfriend, said he told her he loved her. I don't think he meant any of it, but they were close enough that he felt that saying it would elicit the desired response. And it did. Now, once he knew he had her, I believe that's when it went completely off the rails, and that she never saw the rest of this coming. One can be in a consensual relationship, and then that relationship degrades into abuse. It happens all the time. I believe that's what happened to Janel. In my opinion, he played her, broke her down, and then subjected her to horrific situations that no one should ever have to experience. Just like the account of him sharing her pictures, his recruitment of her for his purposes was, I believe, something he mastered over the years. So while Janel's story is vastly different from Rita Chatterton when it comes to being a victim of Vince McMahon, she is no less a victim. Whether she was genuinely attracted to him or saw him as an opportunity for her to better her life and used him as much as he used her in the beginning, I believe she misread who and what he was. The day the filing was announced and details were made public, Vince responded via his spokesperson stating, quote, "This lawsuit is replete with lies, obscene made-up instances that never occurred, and a vindictive distortion of the truth, and that he will vigorously defend himself." A little more than 24 hours later, Slim Jim decided to pause their promotional activities with WWE, stating, quote, "Slim Jim values integrity and respect in all of our partnerships. Given the recent disturbing allegations against Vince McMahon, at this time we've decided to pause our promotional activities with WWE. This decision reflects our commitment to our brand, values, and responsibility to our community." Additionally, Fightful Select reported learning that another potential major sponsor that was considering working with the WWE is now no longer interested. Then at around 5:30 on the 26th, it was announced that Vince McMahon was resigning from TKO Group, saying, quote, "I stand by my prior statements that Ms. Grant's lawsuit is replete with lies, obscene made-up instances that never occurred, and is a vindictive distortion of the truth. I intend to vigorously defend myself against these baseless accusations, and I look forward to clearing my name. However, out of respect for the WWE Universe, the extraordinary TKO business and its board members and shareholders, partners and constituents, and all of the employees and superstars who helped make WWE into the global leader it is today, I have decided to resign from my executive chairmanship and the TKO board of directors effective immediately." For her part, in addition to everything she stated in the complaint, Janel released a statement through her attorney, Ann Callis, that, quote, she hopes any doors of secrecy have been blown off their hinges, adding that she hopes those of the company, past and present, who fear speaking out about harm is a thing of the past. She wishes them all peace. Her attorney has said that in recent days, quote, "My office and my inbox have had a barrage of people wanting to come forward to attest about this culture of corruption and also possible victims. We are just beginning now to wade through all of this, but frankly, we're overwhelmed." As the legal proceedings move into the next phase, it is also important to remember that there are people who have been abundantly aware of Vince's behavior over the last 4 decades. People who knew what was happening and either did nothing, helped cover it up, or participated, that must be held accountable. Several people were referenced in the lawsuit as non-party officers and employees of WWE. These would be individuals not directly involved in the litigation. Before we speculate as to who these individuals might be, it's important to note that they do not appear to be being accused of any sexual misconduct in the complaint, nor am I stating or inferring that any of these individuals were involved. The complaint seems to only allege that they had knowledge of a relationship between Janel and Vince. WWE Corporate Officer Number 1 is described as a high-ranking employee and board member at WWE during Ms. Grant's employment with WWE. Corporate Officer Number 1 continued to work in high-ranking positions in connection with the September 12, 2023 merger. Janel also alleges that she introduced herself to Corporate Officer Number 1 when they passed one another in the hallway. Corporate Officer Number 1 responded by telling Miss Grant that they knew exactly who she was. Not many people whom this could be. So I turned to the Wayback Machine to see if we could narrow the field. Janel worked from June of 2019 to February of 2022. Here is the listing of the board in November 2018. There are no available listings for 2019. The Wayback Machine has captures, but clicking the link results in an access denied error. Here are the listings for April 15th, 2020. And November 20th, 2020. September 10th, 2021. And finally, March 2022. It is my opinion that Paul Levesque is Corporate Officer Number 1. Corporate Officer Number 2 was, quote, a high-ranking employee at WWE who made hiring decisions, conducted prospective employee interviews, and maintained significant control over personnel decisions. Corporate Officer Number 2 worked in these capacities during Miss Grant's employment with WWE. It is my opinion that Jim Johnstone was Corporate Officer Number 2, as he was Senior Vice President of Human Resources. He was let go in April 2021, so he would have been there for her hiring and most of her employment. Corporate Officer Number 3 is an interesting one, as they are described in the complaint as follows: a high-ranking employee and or board member during Miss Grant's employment. It is my opinion that Frank Riddick is Officer Number 3, as he served on the board for years before being hired as the CFO. Corporate Officer Number 4 was a high-ranking employee who worked with legal affairs at the company. Corporate Officer Number 4 held that position from the time of Miss Grant's initial employment until sometime in 2020. It is my opinion that Mark Cowell is Officer Number 4, who worked as a Director of General Accounting before being promoted to the role of Corporate Controller and left the company in November 2020. WWE Superstar is a professional wrestling superstar who performs at branded wrestling events. During the time of Miss Grant's employment, McMahon signed Superstar to a new booking contract with WWE. As mentioned earlier, it is the opinion of many that Brock Lesnar is WWE Superstar. So what's next? While Vince leaving is great news, he never should have been brought back in the first place. A point of interest regarding his return, however, when he reinstated himself on the board, there were a few members that were removed. Jeffrey R. Speed was one of those people, and he just so happened to be the man who led the special committee investigation against Vince regarding the hush money payments. He should have been left to languish. Him simply resigning is not enough, not after everything he's done. Criminal charges are unlikely in this case unless the current federal investigation turns up something for which he can be prosecuted. Otherwise, this leaves monetary punishment as the only recourse. Or is it? I know it's practically impossible, but I think Vince McMahon's memory needs to be scrubbed from WWE, much like they did to Chris Benoit. That really is the only way to hurt him. Money doesn't mean anything to him, but his legacy does. He spent decades building his dynasty, and he should be left with nothing but ruins. Unfortunately, that would also erase a great body of work of WWE talent, and not everyone should have to pay for the sins of one man.
I used to always hear about how jealous and controlling the Macho Man Randy Savage was. How he would keep his wife, Miss Elizabeth, in his dressing room when he went out to perform. Considering everything that is coming to light, it seems like maybe he was justified. Maybe he was protecting what was most important to him, the woman he loved. At the time of this recording, John Laurinaitis has come out and is alleging he too is a victim of Vince McMahon, just as Janel. All but confirming the accusations that Vince is the monster and that all allegations against him have merit. I mean, if Johnny Ace is a victim, maybe Pat Patterson is too. But that's a story for another day.